White people, did you know that research shows we have less empathy? 2014 study from the National Academy of Sciences, 2017 study from the Social, Psychological and Personality Science, 2021 study from the Journal of Humanistic Psychology, 2023 study from Harvard that studied over 60,000 participants. All these studies demonstrated that white people feel less empathy, especially towards black people who are suffering. Even the well-meaning white people. As an academic, a lack of empathy is how we excuse harm, how medical bias happens, how police brutality gets minimized, how workplace abuse and gaslighting gets ignored. It prevents white people from changing the systems that are harming the black community. What can us white people do? 1, when you feel discomfort because of the suffering of other people, stop trying to come up with some bullshit excuses and learn how to sit with the discomfort and connect to it. 2, believe people when they tell you about their suffering instead of trying to minimize it or justify it. And 3, expose yourself to black storytelling. Not just trauma stories, but black stories of joy, of nuance, of complexity. Empathy deepens when everyone is humanized. There's no requirement to feel shame to grow empathy, but there is a requirement to feel something. And I think that's something us white people struggle with. I hope this helps.
Trust me, I have experienced white privilege in the worst form. My most recent experience was when I took my kids to Disneyland Paris and I had traveled with my white nanny. I don't know if the hotel felt like maybe I was the nanny because my kids are very light-skinned and sometimes people think that they are mixed race. I don't know. But the treatment they gave my white nanny, they treated her like a queen and I was treated like trash. Bear in mind, it was an all-expense-paid trip for my nanny. So everything she was ordering, everything was on my bill. And I only got to find out when I went down to check out that morning of my checkout, and they gave me a bill. I was seeing champagne. I said, who ordered these things? Every time I wanted to place an order in my room, I was asked to come down to the reception to pay for whatever it is I wanted before I got served. But my white nanny, they were serving her in her room. I didn't even know. The nights where she didn't have the kids, where I had the kids in my room, she was drinking champagne on my bill. That I made a video then, calling out the hotel, Novotel, and it really went viral back then. So I understand white privilege. I have experienced it. But what I'm trying to say is that sometimes I scroll comment sections and I see some white people are so humble. In humility, they ask, we know we are on the wrong. We know our forefathers did the wrong. How can we make it better? I'm here, I'm listening. But you will see some people will just insult them. Tell them, get out! All I'm saying is that let us just be calm and, tone down, especially when it's someone that is nice and, trying to learn, basically, to see how they can make things better.
Austin Metcalf is one of many perfect examples of why we should stop using the term white privilege, why it's divisive, and why it induces hatred. When you get stabbed at a school event in the heart and people are saying that it's your fault, believing a fake police report and a fake autopsy report that's being circulated around the internet, and you're being called a bad person and a racist, you do not have white privilege. End of story.
White people do this really annoying thing where they try to argue with you over your own fucking culture and try to argue with you over ebonics and shit. And I see it in the comment section time and time again. And it had me thinking about this time I was in college, my junior year in my web development class. I had to make a recipe website and I did it on comfort food from the black community. And I named the website Itis. And the professor went around the room, was like, what do we think about the name Itis? And this one white boy, nobody said anything, but this one white boy was like, I don't like it. It sounds like somebody's sick. And I was like, well, culturally, AAVE terms, it means this. And he was like, that doesn't sound right. I looked around. I was the only black person in that motherfucking room. I was so confused. I said, well, it means this. I don't care what you think it means this. We went back and forth for a little while, and I'm looking at my professor like, damn, I'm looking at you, and you black, but you're Kenyan. You can't even fucking help me because culturally, you don't know what the fuck is going on. And that's what we mean when we say y'all black, but y'all not black. You know what I mean? And the white boy, he Googled it. He was like, oh, it popped up in Urban Dictionary. It means this. I said, I know what the fuck I didn't say fuck. I was like, oh, I know what it means. I didn't need you to read the definition to me. And we moved on. Like, how the fuck do y'all be trying to argue with people? Like, hey, I live this, I speak this is me every day. How the fuck do y'all be trying to argue with people over shit like that? It never makes sense to me.
White privilege. That's right. How can you tell if white privilege exists? I don't know. What if someone found out those white privilege and decided to take an organization to court for it? Would you still claim, no, that ain't white privilege? Or would you say, hey man, it turns out even today, white privilege exists? You see, they found out that if you white or Asian, they gave you a high starting salary and your career progression was better. They made more opportunities for you. That's what the law case said. Google decided, we'll pay you $28 million to drop all of this. Now, they said we do not admit any wrongdoing, but here's $28 million. Now, we're not saying we did anything wrong and white privilege exists, but here's $28 million. Now, we're not saying that we favor white people over all the others, but here's $28 million because we just like giving people $28 million for no reason.
So let's talk about this, because while this person is clearly clueless and needs some education, let's talk about white privilege, because there was a time when I was absolutely certain that white privilege did not exist. And then in 2008, I was taking a class, and I won't go into the greeting card story, because I have talked about that numerous times here on my TikTok, and that was my first seed that came into my head that was like, oh, maybe white privilege does exist. The second two things that happened, I'm pretty ashamed of. So they asked us in class, the social work class that I was taking at the time, what we think it would be like to be a person of color. And specifically, they said, what do we think it would be like to be a person of color and walk into a store? And I'll remind you, this is when I was thinking white privilege doesn't exist. I grew up poor. I've had trauma. I've had blah, blah, blah. I was like, white privilege does not exist, because I did not feel like I was privileged growing up. And my first thought when they asked us that question was nope, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be a person of color and walking into a store. That dropped the second seed. So I was like, holy shit, there's got to be something to this. If I immediately don't want to even envision this scenario, there's got to be more to it. The third thing that happened, which I'm probably the most ashamed of, is I was reading our textbook, and our textbook said in 2032, white people in the United States would be the minority, and people of color would be the majority. My first thought at that point was, holy shit, white people need to have more babies. Like, we can't become the minority in our own country. That was the end of my denying white privilege. Because I didn't even know that I had that thought in my head. And then when I read that, that was my very first thought. And like I said, I am super ashamed of it even at that time. And that's when I started thinking, because my second thought was like, holy shit, where did that even come from? Like, I would not have thought that I was prejudiced or racist or whatever prior to that. And clearly those things existed. And you guys can all come at me on here and be like, yeah, it's terrible. I agree. But you all are the same. All of us white people, we are the same. We might be fighting against it. Like, I'm actively fighting against the prejudice that I have at every moment that I have it. Every moment that I'm aware of it, I am fighting against it. But we all have it. So to this person, Renee in the South, you need to do better. You need to educate yourself, because you're coming across looking very ignorant.
It's so terrible that I hear even black people say that white privilege does not exist. It's crazy, is it not? I don't even live in a white-dominated country. I stay in Africa, but I can tell you that this thing exists. The little ones we even see that come to my country as tourists, I can tell you we can see them even trying to even exercise it, even when they don't have no power in Africa. How dare you say white privilege doesn't exist, right? How dare you even say that? White privilege does not exist. They call it a myth. They say just work harder, as if the playing field has ever been fair. But for black Americans, white privilege isn't theory. It's daily life, and we are tired of pretending it doesn't exist. Watch these videos and I'll be back with the commentary. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share the video. We really, really must talk about this, because I'm crazy right now.
The biggest privilege white people have is not institutional access. Arguably, the biggest privilege that white people have is not having to be hyper-aware of their identity at all times. But keep in mind, I said hyper-aware. That doesn't mean that the white man doesn't know he's a white man and the white woman doesn't know she's a white woman. What it means is that they don't choose to or have to compartmentalize their identities constantly for survival or social proof. In the African community, in the black community, we are too aware of our identities as a result of our circumstances under colonialism, imperialism, and racism in this world. We spend most of our lives playing these word games about who's really black, who's light-skinned, who's dark-skinned, who's brown-skinned, who's really African, who's African-American, who's ADOS, who's South African, who's really African, who's East African. We waste our time and our talent playing these identity politics, when the real politics we need to be playing is the politics of material acquisition in international relations. In no way should we deny our experiences under colorism, under texturism, under tribalism. But if we spend our lifetimes, our efforts, our talents, and our energy focused towards these things, then what room do we have? What space do we have to acquire material conditions for our community? The light skins got stories, the brown skins got stories, the dark skins got stories, the African Americans got stories, the Caribbean Africans got stories, the immigrants got stories, the continental Africans got stories, the European Africans got stories. And again, I will never deny any of our experiences, but we tell these stories and we obsess over these stories and we build our identity upon these stories, but we never tell the story of our material conditions. If we're not addressing our stories under imperialism, I think the other stuff can wait. If we're not addressing our stories under the European patriarchy, I think the other stuff can wait. If we're not addressing our stories under colonialism, I think the other stuff can wait. If we're not addressing our stories under the prison industrial complex, under the healthcare system that disproportionately affects our women, I think the other stuff can wait. Which again, going back to the point of my video, is the reason why white people are ahead in this country. Because while they have the privilege to focus on their material conditions, you're worried about, do people like you or not? How beautiful are you to the beauty standard?
My name's Kylie, and I'm obviously white. I grew up in a conservative white family, and I know there's been a lot of discourse about whether white people should talk about racism, and here's my argument for why I think that not only should we, but we have to. A lot of racism in white families occurs behind closed doors. I've been over at friends' parents' places and heard them say some pretty obscene things about people of color, assuming that I am on their side simply because I'm white. Obviously, this makes for some awkward conversations when I do call them out, but point being, the depths of the racism and the darkness that seeps in deeply into these families can only, in my opinion, truly be exposed by other white people, because they will never be their full racist selves around anyone who is not white. They like to save face publicly and say that they're not racist, but then again, if you go into their homes and you hear the things they say, that would suggest otherwise. I just encourage you, if you're a white person and you know people like this, please say something. Don't just ignore it for fear of conflict.
I'm going to say it. I don't care. Get mad if you get mad. I'm so tired of white people being able to be mediocre. Like, bottom of the barrel mediocre. Like, y'all get away with doing nothing. I mean, I'm not going to say bare minimum. I'm going to say nothing. Like, nothing. If it don't apply, shut your mouth. However, you want to know how I healed from my imposter syndrome? I looked around and saw how incompetent my white peers were. Like, y'all are so incompetent. Like, y'all barely give anything at all. And I'm tired of not saying it. Like, where is the flavor? Where is the creative energy? Like, why is it that you just replicate and water down everything that we do? That's it. I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna keep it cute, because, yeah.
I'm gonna say what I want to say, and I'm not gonna address anything, and I'm gonna go back to my fucking exam season hiatus. It will never be any of your white places to critique and police the way an oppressed person reacts to their oppression. And that applies in all fucking circumstances. Every single circumstance. And those of you who want to support people of color, yeah, it will never be your place to critique the approach that people of color take to getting their freedom. And it will never be your place to critique the way people of color operate in said movements to get their freedom. And it will also never be your place to critique the way the people who are supporting said movement operate as people of color within said movement when they are reacting or interacting with white people. Those of you who tell me everything isn't about race, everything is race, ho. Everything is about race. Everything is about race and race relations, because you listen to certain people, you ignore others, you amplify certain people, you give certain people graces, and then on top of that, you will critique the way that the people that you are villainizing react to your fucking inflammatory actions. It makes no fucking sense, and that's why I don't trust any of you. None of you. I don't trust you. You can wave every flag you want to wave and put everything in your bio and put everything in your fucking name. I don't trust you guys, because you fundamentally disregard the way that basic racism is woven into our institutions. It is a part of the fabric of the makeup of modern society. So why the fuck would you not think that it is part of movements? It is the most relevant factor to me. It is the most relevant factor because it impacts the way everybody moves. It impacts the way I observe behavior. Because a lot of you don't want to admit that you don't listen to people of color. You have to wait for a white person to tell you to do something, and then you do it. And that's not just white people, that's all people as well. I will do another video explaining the way this relates to Congo, okay?
A lady on here I follow said, if only 7% of the world's population is white, then who's enforcing white supremacy? And I looked it up. I believe from different articles that I read, it ranges from 7 to up to 16% of the world's population is white. That's all to say, a minority. And I know that we all know that under these systems that dominate and control us, we all contribute in some way. And unless we unlearn, we will all continue to unconsciously contribute in some way. But to hear the number, to hear the percentage of a population, and I also believe within maybe, let's say it's up to 16% of the world's population is white. I personally believe that in this day and age, only a fraction of that fraction is actually white supremacist, actually racist, actually believes in this ideology. But that's all to say, only a fraction of the world's population has us in a chokehold like this. It's actually embarrassing. But in all seriousness, it's something to reflect on and to note. It's very easy to point the finger over there and say it's them. They're doing this to us. But sometimes the enemy for lack of a better word, is much closer to home than we realize. And I think it's better to reflect within our own spaces and to ask ourselves how we can do better first before we start pointing fingers and say, well, they're not treating us well. Because it really doesn't matter if it's a minority of the world's population.
I always forget just how many white women follow me until I make a post about a racial or cultural issue that is relevant to them. Because then I'm reminded not just about how white women will flip from we're all in this together, like I'm your woke ally, to an absolute raging monster the minute you say, hey, I wish you wouldn't do that, but just how many will flip. And then it hit me that when a lot of white women hear my content, they separate themselves from white, focus on the woman, and then think that somehow we're on the same plane. And so when I'm talking about white people, they find themselves like somehow distanced from that in their heads. But when I call them out specifically, white women, they respond just like white men because they can't separate themselves because they've been called out practically by name. And now people who follow me are calling me racist, hateful, bitter, jealous, every name in the book. And not only is it fascinating to see just how flimsy y'all's allyship is, but it also completely explains why we live in the political landscape we're in now.
Saying that white privilege doesn't exist is a common tool of white supremacy. So privilege comes in a lot of different ways. And it can be contextual based on where you're living or who's in power. The important thing to note is that, yeah, I benefit from white privilege. I also benefit from privilege because I'm skinny, and because I'm able-bodied, and because I'm neurotypical, and because I'm in the middle class, and because I do conform to some standards of conventional beauty. And all of those things together give me a good amount of privilege. But they're different kinds of privilege based in different contexts and different scenarios. And no one is saying that just because you have certain amounts of privilege, that you're never going to face a hardship.
You want to talk about white privilege? I was born dirt poor. Roaches in our food, mattresses on the floor, eviction notices taped to the doors, kind of poor. My parents, their side hustle was beating me and my siblings bloody. I missed more meals than I can count. When we did eat, it was ramen, canned foods, or whatever we could steal from the gas station. There were 8 of us kids. Don't come at me like I grew up in some quiet backwoods town either. We weren't hearing deer rifles. We were hearing 9mm and Glocks on a nightly basis. Not because we were hunting, because we were dodging stray bullets in the inner city. I had a baby as a teenager, thought maybe I could break the cycle, went to college, flunked out quick. Life was swinging before I even had a chance to plant my feet. Then the military came knocking, promised me structure, a future, and a way out. What I got? Another flavor of hell. Straight out of basic, they shipped me to Afghanistan. 19 years old, couldn't buy a beer back home, but I could carry a rifle, kick indoors, and watch friends die in pieces. I came home to a wife who had cheated on me while I deployed, ended in divorce, missed my baby's first steps, first words, first everything. I got the title dad, but only for 2 days every other week when the courts allowed me. So I drank, I numbed it out, I drowned it in alcohol and women, hopped from job to job, security, government contracts, even worked with the feds for a minute, but it all fell apart. I ended up homeless, ashamed, alone, and broken. Now, I've been sober for 4 years, been through more therapy than most folks can stomach, read hundreds of books, and here's what I figured out. As bad as I have had it, if I was black, I probably wouldn't have survived it. That ain't an opinion, that's truth. Black Americans make up 13% of the population, but 38% of the prison population. 1 in 3 black boys born today, they're expected to end up behind bars. That ain't by accident, that is policy. That's centuries of systemic racism passed off as justice. The 13th Amendment did not abolish slavery, it rebranded it. It says slavery is legal as punishment for a crime. That's why we got corporations making billions off of prison labor while folks inside earn cents an hour if they're lucky. That clause was written to target black Americans, and it's still doing exactly that. Now I run an organization called West Virginia Fights Back. We feed people, we take care of people. No strings, no red tape, no begging for scraps. We take care of our own because the government won't. My dream? A Fights Back chapter in every damn state. Abolish the prison industrial complex. Burn the cage down. Build something real in its place. Fred Hampton said, you can jail a revolutionary, but you cannot jail the revolution. This is not about shame. This is about responsibility. If you've had the privilege of not being targeted by the system, you've got the duty to help tear it down.
A couple videos ago, I said white people don't exist. I said that because white people don't call themselves white, they just know that you're black. The only times they reflect upon themselves and see whiteness is when you are in the room or in the conversation. White people don't call themselves white until they have to admit it. And why is that? Because most of the time, they don't have to. They look in the mirror and see human beings. They look in the mirror and see the default. At the very least, straight white men, because a white woman definitely looks in the mirror and understands she's a woman. And that belief that white people are the default is what drives so much discrimination and alienation today. Twitter got mad at me for saying this. I don't care. Your identity as a black person is built upon the identity of another person. Black and white people have existed in this intertwined binary since the beginning of the conception of the word. In the American psyche, the opposite of a black person is a white person. Before you see yourself in the mirror, you must look through the lens of another person. You must understand yourself through someone else's imagination. What is the opposite of a Kenyan person? What is the opposite of a Sri Lankan person? What is the opposite of a Chinese person? What is the opposite of an Argentinian person? What is the opposite of a Canadian person? There is no opposite. There is no relational understanding because they don't have to build their identity upon the existence or the lens of another group. And that precisely is why I speak on this page. Blackness is a beautiful thing, and the story behind blackness is something that we must hold dear to our hearts. But as long as the extent of which we see ourselves is through blackness, we have a problem. And a lot of you motherfuckers that be having this conversation be targeting black Americans. That is not the point of my video. You may be black, but you are also African. And your story did not begin when white people put that label on you. Whether you're an African in America, whether you're an African in Jamaica, whether you're an African in Canada, whether you're an African in France, whether you're an African in Poland, until you claim your nationality, as broad or specific it may be, you have no land. You have no resources. Therefore, you have no political leverage. All you have is money, labor, and vibes. Don't tell me you know American because that American land is not your land. Don't tell me you know American because those American resources are not your resources. Tell me you're European because Europe is not yours. You know what is actually yours? You want to know the people who are ready to give you citizenship right now? People who are eternally connected to you, who look just like you, who shower just like you, who cook food just like you? Freaking people, the African diaspora. And that's why I made that video.
It's an opinion you have that might piss some people off.
I don't think white privilege is a thing. Hear me out. We live in a society where I can go into a store and steal something, get caught, and say the following: it's because I'm black. That store is now canceled. That store is now labeled racist. And I made out for some free shit. I don't know. That sounds like some damn black privilege to me, man. When have you ever seen a white dude get caught? Oh, it's because I'm white.
I don't necessarily understand why privilege is such a hot button issue. All that means is that you have the privilege of not having to face a certain struggle. For example, if you were born with 2 working legs, you never had to struggle with things not being wheelchair accessible. That's your privilege, and that's my privilege too. If you were born with straight hair, you never had to buy 10,000 products in order to manage your curly hair because you don't have it. That's your privilege. And if you were born with white skin, you never had to worry that someone was treating you differently just because of the color of your skin. That's your white privilege.
The thing about white privilege, and I'm going to touch your hand when I say this, so hold my hand, is that the struggles and trauma you went through suck. But they didn't happen because you were white. And that's the thing. I will go through things in every space I occupy on every continent in every country that you won't understand because I look like this and you look like that. Example, we both might be broke by the end of the day, but when you popped out the womb, your mother's first thought was not, what is a racially ambiguous, gender ambiguous name I can give you that will give you a leg up in life? Your mom just gave you a name. And I can explain to you all of the well-researched, well-backed up ways that privilege has colored your life in a way that you are yet to understand. But before you listen to me, you will decide that you hate me because that is easier. And that is a privilege that you get to have. You get to maneuver the world with your anger and hate based on your trauma without ever thinking about the nuances, much less living them. And that is the privilege that you choose to not understand.
I'll tell you about privilege. I'm privileged. I'm privileged because I live in the greatest country under heaven. I'm privileged because I get an opportunity every day to get up and work, to better my life, to make to make the right decisions. I'm privileged because I live in a country where I can worship whatever I want to. You know what? People talking about privilege and they're receiving government entitlements and subsidies and they want to talk about someone else who has worked hard to sustain this country. Listen, there was a point in time in my life when I needed assistance, right? And I used a food stamp. I got food stamps for a period of time. But then guess what? I didn't have the medical issues. Well, I had surgeries and I ended up going back to work. So then I stopped with the entitlement. So privilege is being in a country where you have the opportunity to get some help if you need it. And it's not racial. But if you complain what happens is you end up like, I don't know if you've ever read the story of the children of Israel, but they were on what some say was an 11-day journey or however long, and ended up staying stuck for 40 years because they were murmuring, complaining about the conditions around them instead of getting up and being obedient and doing what they knew they should do. So miss me with the privilege stuff, you guys. Those of us who are complaining about any specific group having more privilege over the other, it's not real. I don't believe in it, right? And if you adapt that victim mentality for yourself, then what you are doing is limiting yourself to the opportunities that you can have. It's just like I heard a story about Barack Obama he told a story about, even though I don't even like to, but anyway, he told a story about a young man who after years after the Tuskegee Airmen had been pilots, had believed that a black man did not have the opportunity to be a pilot in the U.S. Air Force because he just was ignorant to the facts, and so he didn't even want to pursue it, although it was his passion, because he didn't believe it was available to him. But it was. And just like it's the same today, there are people who believe that there are certain windows or certain barriers or certain walls that don't exist, only in their minds, if they would get up and go out and do something. Like the song says, get up, get out and do something. Then they would accomplish something. Nothing from nothing brings something. That's another song too. Nothing from nothing brings nothing. And so at the end of the day, listen, we live in the greatest country under heaven. And we happen to have the greatest president under heaven at this particular point in time on all the God has appointed him for such a time as this. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I pray for him every day, and I hope that you do too, because if you're a Christian, Romans 13, chapter 13, verses 1 and 2 says that you should. And hey, that's my 2 cents. It's Uncle Tom, y'all, and as always, to God be all the glory.
I don't believe in white privilege the way it's often framed. What I think we're really seeing is cultural advantage, okay? So, people who tend to grow up with values that already align with society, things like structure, respect of authority, having good communication skills, they tend to move through the system much easier, okay? And that's not about skin color. It's about being raised in a way that fits the world you're already stepping into, right? And the truth is, most working class families, whether that's black, white, or brown, they don't always instill those values in their children. There tends to be no real structure, and they can't even afford to take their kids on holiday, every summer. And they don't tend to place a huge focus on education. And when you think of middle class families, they're more likely to teach their kids some form of structure, discipline the children, and also, they can afford to go on holiday once every summer. And their children tend to enter the workforce and blend in much better because they're ready, So for me, it's not white privilege, it's cultural alignment. What do you guys think?
If you're white and you still somehow don't believe in white privilege, I need y'all to listen to me closely. The reason you don't believe in white privilege is because you think, oh, I don't get money just because I exist. I don't get rewarded because I'm white. That's not what white privilege is. White privilege isn't actually a privilege. It's not being punished for who you are. It's not being scared when you pass by a cop just because of your existence. It's not being where you're going to be followed around in a store by the management, not because of what you're wearing or any of that, just because of what you look like. It's never having to be where they won't get a job because of the color of your skin. It's not even knowing what the concept of white privilege means because you're too privileged to realize that your privilege is just not being punished just because you exist.
I really don't know. I wish I could tell you. I really wish I could tell you because it's true. In today's society, black folks think about white folks way more than white folks think about black folks. The ratio in the amount of videos that you see of white people talking about black people versus black people talking about white people will astonish you. It's like night and day. And I truly don't understand it because the amount of videos that are made on white people, if those same white people were to make those type of videos, they would be labeled racist, be labeled all this shit, people would be finding their jobs, all this bullshit. That's another reason why I say white privilege doesn't exist, because if that was the case, black people wouldn't have the ability to talk shit as much as they do on the privileged. Privileged people are untouchable, in my opinion. The last time I checked, anytime a white person says anything about a black person, they get in trouble for it. That seems very protected, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm just saying. When it comes down to it, it's jealousy. Not saying all of them, but a lot of them are. They're just jealous. Especially the younger women. They're jealous of these white girls like never before. Perfect example of that, Caitlin Clark.
Welcome back. How dare you say there is nothing like white supremacy? There's nothing like white privilege. When in your day-to-day life, you can see it in their education, you can see it in Medicaid, you can see it in everything. And you believe it. What is wrong with you guys? What are you even turning into? It's crazy. It's really, really crazy. I feel so bad. How would you say that someone treats you so bad? In fact, they even streamline it to the extent that they don't even want the black people to actually talk about it. How? No white person will go through all of this and not talk about it for the rest of their life. None. What do you think about redlining? What do you talk about? What about segregation? Are those things no longer there? It's crazy. To be honest, I want to see your take in the comments. Have anyone ever told you that white privilege isn't real? What do you say? Let's talk about it in the comments. Do not forget to subscribe, like, share this video, turn on your notification button, right? Every time, so you can really, really come and have discussions like this with us. I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.